Good morning and nearly lunchtime to everybody. Welcome to the panel 1 session. What we have is understanding what really needs to be done and sharing the necessary knowledge. This session is the first for the panel 1. And just to remind you that panel 1 is all about policies and programs to drive transformation. So we are going to focus very heavily on this topic. And just so you know, the background to panel 1 being about policies and programs is really, we are considering the great challenge that we have of decarbonization by 2050 and how we can bring about a step change in the design of policies and programs to meet this, let's say, 2050 challenge. Now, this particular panel, and not just this session, but overall the panel over the course of this conference, is focused really on two questions. How can we deliver a more effective multi-stakeholder approach on this design or transformative design of policies and programs? And two, if we consider that energy efficiency is the core of decarbonization, we also have to consider that we can't do this just with energy efficiency, that it interconnects with so many other topics, ranging from financing, emerging technologies, renewable energy. So how do we interconnect those and include those in our consideration of decarbonization? So let me quickly introduce myself. Hannes McNulty as the panel leader. Normally we would also have Jenny Chu from the climate group as a second panel leader, but unfortunately due to the date change of this conference, she wasn't able to join. So it'll just be me for this particular panel. And along with myself, of course, we have all the panelists to this particular session. And today we have Konstantin Kulterer, he's from the Austrian Energy Agency. We have Cédric Jeanneret from SIG and Helena Lindquist from Lightswitch. We have Rod Janssen, who is also speaking for Stefan Ambitnoff from the Institute for Energy Efficiency and Production, and Rod himself is from Energy and Demand. And we have Adam, I always get the mix up on the surname, Adam, apologies, Pawelas, who is now with Danone Waters, but was formerly from Carlsberg Breweries, which is from the perspective he'll be speaking. So, before we jump into presentations, before we hand over to the amazing stories you're about to hear, I just want to outline a few simple things to keep in mind, in particular for the audience when it comes to the questions. We are going to do the 4 presentations in one go, and we will do the discussion at the end of this session. That means our panelists are going to be extraordinarily good on time, and they're going to finish quickly so that we can get into the discussion. For the discussion, we will use the questions you, the audience, post on the Whova Q&A section of this session. So very important is I will only be picking out questions from the Q&A session, not from the chat function in Whova. So please put them there. Try not to duplicate questions. If possible, if you see your question is already there, vote. You can actually vote for existing questions. That brings them higher up the list. Please be clear with your questions so that they're easy to read. And if you have a particular person you'd like to address them to, also mention that as well. So I don't want to take up too much time because I said we want to get quickly to the discussion. So the first thing I will do is I'm going to hand over straight away to the first panelist, who is Konstantin Kulterer, and he is going to present on IMPAWATT, Actions to Improve the Energy Culture. Please.
So good morning or afternoon, everyone. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Konstantin, and I'm working at the Austrian Energy Agency in the field of energy efficiency in commerce and industry. So today I'm going to talk to you about the IMPAWATT project we are currently working on under the leadership of the Swiss coordinator Plan Air. And the IMPAWATT project is a EU-funded project under Horizon 2020, which started in June 2018. And participants come from Germany, Finland, France, Italy, and Austria. Okay. So Firstly, I want to give you some insights into the background of the project. Secondly, I'll describe the main output of the project, which is the IMPAWATT platform. I will briefly explain its content and the target group that we want to reach. As to the content, I want to give a few examples of the information regarding energy efficiency and explain to you how the quiz on the platform works. Finally, I show you the structure of the energy culture survey and a little bit talk about the support for companies that we can provide. So what is the background of the project, or why IMPAWATT? In industry and service companies, there is often no investment in energy efficiency because those responsible face a multitude of barriers. The main are the lack of time, lack of internal resources, or lack of knowledge. And IMPAWATT deals exactly with such obstacles. And the IMPAWATT project team therefore created a free of charge platform for training and knowledge building of employees. And the areas included are energy efficiency, energy culture, and sustainable supply chain in production and service companies. Yeah, the platform offers tools tailored for each company, and the tools are available in French, German, Italian, or English. Yeah, the platform targets primarily the persons in charge of energy in companies, addressing them as Mr. or Mrs. Energy, but also external consultants. On the platform, they will find useful material to implement energy efficiency recommendations, monitor the energy consumption, but also to increase the skills of employees in various departments. It can be purchase department, production staff, technical staff, but also decision makers. Yeah, now which topics are covered on the platform, or which content can you expect? Concerning energy efficiency, we provide material on energy management, on equipments like ventilation, compressed air, or pumping systems, heating of buildings, lighting systems, process heating, mobility, renewable energy. With respect to energy culture, we develop material on how to motivate staff and induce behavior change. For a sustainable supply chain, we develop presentations on life cycle assessment, use of sustainability indicators, or environmental labeling. Now, as an example, the efficiency information. The following documents were developed for each of the 12 efficiency topics: open PowerPoint presentation, description of saving measures, checklists and data collection sheets, for around 40 best cases, and the quiz to check your own knowledge or that of the employees. And you can use all of this material for internal workshop or for your own advanced trainings. So what information can you find in a description of measures? First, an overview of the individual technology areas. Then you will see a description of the energy efficiency measure. And in addition, IMPAWATT includes information on the payback time, on measurement verification, and examples for implementation. Overall, we described around 70 measures. Yeah, in the checklist, you will find questions for the different technologies for the on-site inspection. As an example, for mobility, do you have the key figures? Do you know the CO2 emissions, or do you use video conferences? The data entry sheet, or the data collection sheet, shows tables for the data, e.g. number and type of vehicles, mileage, and this will help you to collect the relevant data during inspection. Yeah, I already mentioned the quiz. You will find that IMPAWATT offers a quiz for every technology, as well as for the topics of energy management and sustainable supply chain. And the quiz relates to information from the presentation and serves to check your knowledge. It can be sent via the platform to the email addresses, and the energy manager automatically receives the evaluation and presentation of the results at the end. And we recommend you to use the results as a basis for further training of yourself or of your staff. Yeah, in the last part of my talk, I want to discuss the survey on energy culture that we prepared. One of the first steps to assist companies in improving their energy culture is to conduct a thorough investigation of the existing circumstances. And therefore, on the platform, a survey was integrated. And the energy culture survey aims to capture the energy manager's point of view and that of the employees, while also assessing the status of energy efficiency within the whole organization. And it is based on the IMPAWATT maturity matrix. The question incorporated in the survey investigates the 5 main pillars on the energy behavior matrix. This is awareness of technologies, specific cultural habits like user beliefs, motivations, aspirations. Then very important, current energy practices, so activities and processes in places. Then external factors, meaning such as community thinking, national regulatory frameworks in places or social networks. And finally, the 5th pillar, the effect and perception of barriers. And now for each pillar, a set of specific questions is assigned, and each question includes a set of options for the respondents to choose. And in turn, each option has a score, and the score allows the energy manager to assess the maturity of each pillar, and therefore giving him the possibility to identify gaps and areas where he can improve. And the maturity matrix also suggests actions or provides action recommendations for each pillar and based on the score obtained. And examples included e.g. are workshops, energy directives, performance indicators, use of social media, or suggestion schemes. Yeah, the survey is divided into 2 parts, one for the energy manager and one for the employee. And the survey for the energy manager acts as a self-assessment tool and facilitates insights into the organization commitment to energy efficiency, highlighting, for example, information about energy targets set by the organization. On the other hand, the survey for employees reveals personal lifestyle and habits, such as switching of lights, daily mode of transportation, general awareness about energy consumption. And the tool automatically generates action recommendations for employees, which are shown to the energy manager. And he or she analyzes the results and makes an implementation plan. So defining the timeline, determining the action, the person responsible, and the time frame. Furthermore, they can conduct other surveys at certain points in the future to follow up on the progress after the actions have been implemented. At the beginning, I mentioned that we also support companies. So we support more than 100 companies in using and testing its materials and tools. And some of the companies are supported by on-site workshops, or at least were supported by on-site workshops, or short energy audits. And some are assisted via email, webcasts, and telephone conferences. In addition, additionally, a webinar series of 10 events per country were organized in all partner countries during the last months. Yeah, finally, I want to invite you to register on the platform and test the different tools mentioned in this presentation, e.g. the energy culture survey or the different presentation on technologies or motivation of employees and quizzes. And in my opinion, especially trainings of employees in the field of energy efficiency is still a weak point in different companies and can be improved. And I think the platform is a very good tool to cover this point. So for questions, do not hesitate to contact me or the persons mentioned in this slide for the different countries and companies. Yeah, so thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer the questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Konstantin. And I have to admit, you are my dream panelist. You kept extraordinarily well on time. It really is much appreciated. And it's a great lead for all the other panelists to come. So many, many thanks for timekeeping, but also for a very, very interesting presentation. And I do hope to see the questions popping into the Q&A section now, because I do feel an initiative like that warrants a lot of questions, good questions to get good feedback. So please feel free, go into your Q&A section and start posting your questions. We'll collect them until the end. So up next, we have Cédric Jeanneret and Helena Lindquist, who are going to present on No Time to Waste, Reinventing the Wheel, introducing the concept of a pan-European interactive knowledge transfer platform for radical energy savings. So, Cédric, I hand over to you because I think this could be quite an exciting presentation to hear more about.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have the slides? Well, I will start. Thank you. So I'm Cédric Jeanneret. I work in Switzerland for energy utilities who have decided not only sell energy, but also helping their clients to consume only the energy they need, and so to decrease the energy consumptions. I'm very happy to talk this morning on this project of platform to boost energy savings. This idea is born during several eceee informal sessions during efficiency industry in Berlin in 2018, and also during the last eceee summer study in Presqu'île de Gien in 2019. It was an informal session called Energy Savings Cooperation, a new experience sharing culture. Three of the co-authors of our paper are online: Helena from Lightswitch, Sweden, Iman from the University of Geneva, and me. Suzanne from the Swiss Electrician Association and Daniel from the University of Geneva was not able to join. So thank you to all for being with us today. We hope a good exchange around this idea of stop reinventing the wheel and how to boost best practices and build action-oriented knowledge. So my next slide. Yes. First, I will make a short introduction and rapidly present our main conclusion based on the interviews we have made in 4 European countries. And then Helena will present our idea to boost knowledge collaboration to help achieve these big efficiency and sufficiency gains we have to achieve decarbonization. So as we know, Europe risks to not meet its energy savings 2020 and 2030 targets. And also the current pandemic is an opportunity for a Green New Deal and to take actions and to exploit the energy savings potential in all sectors. And as it was said in the opening plenary session, efficiency and sufficiency are the first fuels to make a carbon-free world. So, next slide. So, most known drivers are indeed technological innovation and policy instruments, but many studies have also highlighted the important role informational, behavioral, and organizational drivers. Especially the aspects related to sufficiency are more related with cultural values. Then we speak of non-technological innovation and the idea of communication, networking, and best practice sharing. Yes, so, sorry. So we did 9 first semi-structured one hour interviews with 9 networks and organizations in the energy sector across Europe to derive their success factor and learn about their challenges in facilitating knowledge sharing between members. In Germany, with this huge energy efficiency network, France, Sweden, and Switzerland, where an interesting work is done by my colleague from the geothermal side, and also my team dedicated to energy efficiency and sufficiency. So basically, the main point is that it can be profitable to switch from a top-down approach to a bottom-up transfer knowledge approach. And that best practices are good, can provide inspiration, but are generally well-known, and it's sometimes a bit boring to focus only on it, because real failures and concrete mistakes are sometimes, let's say, more crunchy and provide much more concrete knowledge. And we assume that these uncertain times we are living now are good times to be mature enough to elaborate concrete knowledge also based on our mistakes. So first conclusion from interviews and our own experience. The potential for advancing energy savings through knowledge transfers is great. But most activities organized today are not designed and structured to maximize learning, enabling action on behalf of participants. And by applying a structured approach and creating good conditions for learning, the diamonds of tacit knowledge, knowledge from concrete experiences, the underlines knowledge of individuals and organization can be unlocked, shared, and come to use in new contexts. Design learn-focused activities, for example, solve concrete problems, are more resource-intensive and requires perhaps more effort by participants, but they have greater impacts in terms of building capacity to apply knowledge in one's own context. Organizing knowledge transfer in workshop, in smaller groups, informal and trusting atmosphere is important for learning, fostering a humble and positive attitude to learn and sharing, especially from our mistakes. I will let now the floor to Helena to develop this idea of knowledge sharing and learning by using approaches, which are crucial points, especially in this energy saving field, because as you know, energy savings are much more or less visible than PV panels or windmills. Helena, please continue.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So let's see if I can do the screen. Yes. So on the basis of this research we've done in these interviews and our own experience and thoughts about what is necessary to accelerate progress towards the climate goals, we are in the process of developing quite a bold new concept. Innovation and development of new ideas is, of course, very important, but we believe that many of the solutions we need to rapidly decarbonize society already exist and have been tried in various contexts and formats. And as Cédric said, there's really a goldmine of knowledge and experience embedded in organizations, individuals out there. And to exploit this untapped potential, it's now time to set up the structures, the methods and the tools to allow these existing solutions to be implemented in and further developed in new contexts. And for this to happen, we need to to support organizations to customize the solutions to their own contexts. And this involves both the transfer of existing knowledge and experience from one context to another, but also an innovation element to make a solution fit in a different set of circumstances. And to really support this development, we need to focus more on demand-driven organizational and individual learning, as Cédric was saying. And we take the notion seriously that there's a really big difference between to have information and knowledge, because knowledge is something that you can do something with. We need to focus more on the capacity building element than on spreading information. Well, in society in general, we think at this point. And to provide this support, you need the necessary skills. You need to understand the mechanisms for how knowledge is transferred between people. It's also necessary to have a very structured approach to support the learning and customization process. So what we are proposing is to create a platform for structured and deep dive knowledge sharing between stakeholders with the aim of achieving real world energy savings. And the purpose of this platform is really to provide meaningful, demand driven and action oriented peer-to-peer collaboration, putting the emphasis more on the how to do it and then what has been done to enable action. I'm just going to check on my time. Yes. When developing this idea to create this kind of platform, we've taken inspiration from various sources, both my own within Lightswitch from working with interactive knowledge transfer in many different contexts, both internationally and at national level in Sweden, and with many different types of stakeholders. And then we have the University of Geneva and the experience from SIG with other methodological tools, for example, the REX methodology for providing feedbacks on real projects. We've also been inspired by the very strong social fabrics and science-based approach in organizations like eceee that have a wide reach, both into policy, practice and research. And another factor is actually timing, how this corona pandemic is changing the world as we know it, and also changing the way we work with each other and collaborate with each other digitally. So, next slide. It's not working. Yes, okay. So the concept we're proposing is to form a digital platform for transdisciplinary peer-to-peer collaboration between countries, sectors, and different types of stakeholders, because we want to take a system view of this. And we are aware that there are a lot of different really great web resources that offer quality information and examples of good practice, toolkits and so on. And we had a great example of the IMPAWATT platform, for example. But on top of that, we want to take a big step further from these type of information sources that we do need. But we want to create a structure through which organizations and individuals can take part in more interactive projects with a view to share and gain knowledge in a demand-driven and action-oriented way. So we foresee that the platform will include some informational resources or link to other type of platforms like IMPAWATT or similar. But on top of that, we want to enable the real interaction between stakeholders on topics of common interest. And we want this platform to be able to be the hub for various types of activities, from quite simple things like short webinars to more advanced and longer processes for knowledge transfer, enabling or resulting in actually real action on the ground. And we see this platform as a concrete meeting place between academic research and practice as well. And we would like to promote a greater degree of involvement by researchers in projects of a more practical nature, both to offer energy sector stakeholders state-of-the-art knowledge on specific topics, but also to provide the academic world with information about real needs that could inspire to new academic inquiries. And one innovation we would like to develop and implement is the knowledge needs matrix, to be able to structure and identify who are the bearers of knowledge and where are the knowledge needs, and to be able to match these in a good way. So the platform will be a digital structure, and we think that most of the activities will be web-based with Zoom and documentation on Mural, for example. But it could also be used for organizing face-to-face or in real life activities, like workshops, site visits, or similar. And for a thing like this to work in practice, it needs, of course, high quality management for organizing this type of activities, doing all the communication, developing the platform, etc. And it needs adequate resources to do so. What we also need is the participants. We need committed sector stakeholders that see the value of deeper collaboration between peers in other organizations and countries to avoid them reinventing those wheels. And we think that we need to have a core of committed organizations supporting this platform who can also take initiative to do projects and involve their respective networks. So this very briefly, just this little visualization of this knowledge needs matrix is really about matching existing knowledge in individual organizations and development needs in others. So we are really at the start of this now, and we are I've started working on a concept note to take this down into more detail, and we're hoping to realize this in 2 or 3 years' time. Yeah, so we're really working on this. We're starting now. So in summary, as the last slide, the urgency of the climate crisis calls for new ways of collaborating effectively and efficiently, and to capitalize much more on existing knowledge and experiences that are embedded in people and organizations. And our research and experience suggests that we need structured methods for demand-driven knowledge transfer, and that is not extensively used in existing networks in the energy sector today, not as much as it should anyway. And building on the strength of the eceee International Network and its emphasis on science-based evidence, we propose to create a knowledge transfer platform based on proven methods and successful experiences from various contexts. Yes, thank you. We look forward to discussing these next steps with you. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Helena and Cédric. I have to admit, I really like the idea of making better use of what already exists in many ways. I think this is actually really the most important step forward. We don't have to keep reinventing stuff, as you say. It's definitely, it's there. Let's make better use of it before we try to do anything else. So actually a very, very good idea. And I'm glad to see that the questions are slowly appearing in Q&A. So we have 2 more presentations to go. So hopefully lots of time for plenty more questions to build up. Next up, we have Rod Janssen, who is going to speak about the 5 steps to decarbonization. Rod, I hand over to you, please.
Great. Now, do I have the slides presentation? Okay. Thank you. I'm Rod Janssen from Energy and Demand, and my collaborator is Stefan Buttner from the Institute of Energy Efficiency and Production at the University of Stuttgart. This whole panel is called Policies and Programs to Drive Transformation. Driving transformation is a fundamentally difficult thing when we're talking about decarbonizing between now and 2030, 2040, 2050. I'm reminded of a book written in the mid-1980s by the National Research Council in the United States called Energy Use, the Human Dimension. This is all about the human dimension. This is about you. This is about me. This is about our organizations. So it's about behavior changes. It's about strengthening. Let me just set the scene. We've got these 5 steps, but I want to just set the scene first. Let me just, here we go. Oh, wrong way. Okay. You know, we all have a view on climate change and other issues, but often our views are different. You know, we have a different understanding. We come from a different context. What's difficult in decarbonizing is to try and bring the audience to the same page to sort of create a general interest. And if we can get a relationship on the topic to be created, there's a better chance of having some buy-in. And this means we really need to achieve an intrinsic acknowledgement of that's a prerequisite to success. This word intrinsic will come back time and time again. What we're trying to do is not try to be superficial from some of these funny newspapers or magazines or social media. It's really fundamentally understanding something. And so what we've done is that we've actually got a sequence of these 5 criteria, 5 steps that will help leverage things a little bit and make it a little bit more understandable. The first step is to create intrinsic awareness. That's a real fundamental understanding of what the problems are and some of the solutions. Last week I was at I'm on an advisory group for the LIFE program, and they wanted me to list the priorities for new programs that they should be funding. And I said, the first one has to be on awareness. I was on a Horizon 2020 project, which ended last year. We spent 3 years creating awareness. We didn't get very far. This was after 3 years, but it's also for IASME and all that, it's hard to find a KPI for creating awareness, but we have to find it. And so we've got to find that solution to this, and it's not easy. So, but just creating awareness is one thing. So the general problem when we have, Greta Thunberg, okay, our conference is in Sweden virtually, but so let's talk about her. And so she has been creating awareness, but she doesn't get down to the level of understanding, and we don't expect her to. But the important thing about the understanding is that each type of stakeholder, each one of us is able to make a difference, no matter how big nor small. I say this to my grandchildren. I say this to all my friends. The way you drive a car, the way you live your life makes a difference. And so we have to look at it in a very fundamental way. And so it's not going to be easy, but the individuals should act out of self-motivation. In some ways, we do this through ISO 50001 when we have our energy management system in an enterprise to get them all moving at the same sort of step. It's not easy, but it's got to be done. And so the important point is that it's in our hands to change something. We see this even with the COVID-19 right now. I wear a mask when I go outside. I have to make a difference to my neighbor or to the kids down the street. The solution is in my hands. And it's in your hands. And so the individuals, it goes back to this book from the 1980s, Energy Use, the Human Dimension. And we've got to be able to, but you've got to feel sort of empowered that you actually can initiate change somehow in your enterprise or in your home or whatever. As I say, the whole topic of this panel is on driving transformation. Transformation of our society starts at the individual level. So we have to enable stakeholders. And so, I mean, each one of us has a different context, whether we're working in a factory, we're working in an office, whether we're working in the Energy Commission or some government agency or regional agency. So you have to look at who are the stakeholders around you. Someone earlier mentioned about energy managers. Well, the energy managers could be some of those stakeholders. It could be an ESCO. It could be regional energy agencies. It could be, but it's for you to sort of figure out the people around you that you've got to convince and that they can self-reinforce and bring it back to you. And so you can show them ways to educate themselves. I mean, that sounds a bit silly to say that, but it's actually not. Even with ESCOs, again, going back to this LIFE program last week, I was saying one of the real problems with ESCOs is that there's not enough entrepreneurship in Europe. That, you know, there's been a lot of mandatory audits, but are they knocking on the doors of those companies to actually sort of say, look, we can help you implement those. Very little of that. And I was involved in one program where we tried to get the ESCO to not just write an energy audit report, but to write an executive summary that would go to the CFO or that would go to the board, so that try to make it a strategic decision. And it took them, it was very hard to get them to understand that, because most of them are engineers and they have a hard time thinking in a business-like sense and what gets a decision made. So, but the last point, need for a reliable and trustworthy facilitator. Building trust is not easy. I'm originally Canadian. I remember working on municipal energy programs where they figured it took 6 years to take somebody in a municipal administration before that they really got implanted. It could be a staff member, it could be a council board member, it could be a politician, but it really took 6 years to fundamentally get to convince that administration of the way forward for sustainability. So, I mean, we're not talking something simple. But the fourth step is to actually trigger decisions. We've been empowering people. We've got our stakeholders. We're looking at that. So now we have to build up confidence and create comfort to actually make a decision. And so to take away that fear of failure. And the Horizon 2020, to their credit, has developed some de-risking programs, and some of them, like Trust EE and EQuad, have actually gone into the market to try and build up that level of confidence that the fear of failure. And I know there's going to be some concerns after the COVID-19 thing that some companies are going to be very reluctant to invest. But on the other hand, they've also got to be able to compete. So there may be, as we saw from the company in Sweden, in terms of actually, in some cases, we simply don't have any choice. But the target is to trigger one's decision to dare going for the solution identified. That dare to actually developing that level of confidence is absolutely fundamental. Now, finally, the figure is to bring about implementation. Sometimes you get all of these steps going and it goes nowhere. And that's going to happen sometimes. But I mean, as we saw in the previous presentation, in terms of looking at best practice and looking at developing a platform or whatever, there's to build up some confidence and to actually give some examples of implementation. I was talking to some people from the Cogeneration Association in Italy just a few weeks ago, and they just said, we need more dissemination. We need more examples of what's actually worked in Finland or Sweden or whatever that we can take to Italy. So the more we can reinforce a lot of these points, the better we can do. So, I mean, what I'm doing is just giving you a little pep rally of some of the things. What I want you to do is, when this presentation is available online, I want you to go look at it. Probably what I've said will be going in one ear and out the other right now, because you're being bombarded by too much. But this is a matter of being able to sit back and thinking it through. And so this whole steps, just think about it. Go sit down over a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever you want and think about this whole process, from creating awareness right through to implementation, to see if it fits for you and how comfortable you are with that. Because it's within you as individuals, as me as an individual, that we can actually achieve something. And on that, Hannes, I might have been even a little faster. Thank you.
Yes, Rod, you won the competition. You have been the fastest so far, just marginally beating Konstantin. But thank you very much, Rod. I have to admit it was a very, very interesting presentation. This idea of really being a bit systematic about thinking about the steps, I think, is very important. As you said, take a moment, see what lies ahead, see what needs to be done. narrowing it down to the 5 steps, I think, is actually quite a clever idea, and one which would be good to get some feedback on if people agree with this type of 5 steps, if they think there's more involved, if we're missing a step. I think it would be great to hear from other people on this. So again, feel free to let us know in the Q&A about that. Now, our next presentation, our last one before we move into the discussion, is from Adam Pawelas. He is going to talk about what the industry needs from energy efficiency and its reflections on energy efficiency programs in food and beverage sector. Adam is very much an industry guy. He is bringing, let's say, a dose of reality as well to the discussion, I believe, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say, Adam. Please.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we
can. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to share with you, with the audience, especially those that are generalists that face an implementation or in charge of implementing industry multi-site energy efficiency or energy transition programs. I would like to share my reflections from food and beverage industry. So it's not only the brewery perspective that is noted in the headline of my role. It is also after discussions and site visits and reference visits of my industry peers in light industries. Why I think there's importance of framing or making a tailor-made approach for the energy efficiency projects in the food and beverage industry. This industry is typically related to multiple uses of energy. There is no single process that consumes majority, so there is no strong engineering approach. It's more behavioral, it's more organizational, it's more managerial approach that is necessary to bring this agenda forward. And secondly, typically in this industries, the energy consumption, the cost of energy consumption in the final product is below 10% of the value. So it needs a special zooming into the focus of certain things to deliver and to keep the focus attention of the top management. I would like to list for you the what, why, and how of energy efficiency programs in the food and beverage sector. I would like to give you my reflections on success or failure factors of implementing these energy programs, and a very few examples, time permitting, of course. The needs. So it was already mentioned. Energy efficiency is no doubt from a hierarchy. It's important that it comes first because it is saving energy, conserving energy. It's a vital contribution to CO2 reduction interventions. And I would like to also give you an attention that apart from the typical metrics like energy intensity of a product, now I think more and more companies are moving into carbon intensity of the product. So energy efficiency is the use with other energy attributes. It makes the carbon intensity metric. Of course, no needless to say, the classical driver of energy efficiency programs was improving the bottom line of organizations, including OPEX. The third point is a very interesting one I came across when designing the roadmap of energy transition for the breweries. It's important to give the message that energy efficiency is also funding the energy transition. So as a clear example, the energy efficiency interventions in the breweries were considered as 20% of the capital needed for the next 10 years investments in energy transition. So not insignificant, really. On the external perspective, of course, we do energy efficiency. Of course, it has to be communicated in the right way for layman audience, but it improves the sustainable image of consumer-facing companies, of course. It also aids employer branding. So the new generations of employees that are coming, they really look at these kind of attributes of companies. Are we a company with mission, with a purpose, and so on. Peer pressure activates also more companies to join efforts. So if there is in a single industry, there is an industry association, there is an industry category like water plants, beverage, soft drinks, dairy, and so on. This peer pressure of who's doing what and what is achieved drives the efforts of the other in the industry. The last point, a very important one, on external perspective is the public commitments, pledges. So you know that there's a number of companies that now pledge carbon neutrality, intending to achieve it in 10, 15, 20 years from now with some interim targets. So there's a pressure. It's not only the pledge, you have to work on the plan to deliver it because someone will be keeping score of it anyway. Of course, regulatory schemes, they help. It could be national, it could be sectoral, it could be also regional. And I will give you one example. Yes, so having said that, it's important to know that those that went many years through energy efficiency programs, they went through a number of successes and failures. I try to classify them into 6 categories. So the failure of commitment, of lasting commitment, the failure to properly resource the energy efficiency programs, the failure to prioritize, the failure to sustain, the failure to measure, smart measure, and the failure to adapt. Let me talk you through some of these key statements related to all the categories here. So the lasting commitments, the first, very important, you know it from ISO systems, the genuine commitment in involvement of top management. Genuine meaning there is a true interest that we would like to do it, we would like to walk the talk, that the top management is listening to the resources issues, to understand the nature of these projects. So it's important that the best energy efficiency programs are not merely focused on quick savings, but also on a deeper purpose. So with an attention to deeper understanding of improvement levers in production, in logistics, in technologies, and so on. And for that, there is a role of top management, which I really appreciate, is fostering the team collaboration. So it is to enable the utility, the energy managers, as you say, or the team, the working group of the energy efficiency to work across functions. So working across operations, engineering, capital projects, procurement, planning, and controlling. It's very important. Factor 2, sufficient resourcing. So having the ambitions, we have to also see how we're going to get there. Do we have resources fitting to these objectives and scale of the program? So we need to understand the skill gaps potentially and the people development, recruitment needs or external support. It's also important to have the necessary capital or external financing provided with clear project acceptance criteria. So the best way is to define a category of energy efficiency projects or efficiency improvement projects. Develop some clear criteria to streamline these projects so that not every project from a certain value has to go through acceptance over and over again, because it's also demotivating the teams. Factor 3, smart prioritization. Yes, I think there's an ideal world where you can start off all actions, all at once actions in all possible areas where you see there's a gap to best performance, to best energy efficiency. It's probably more attention and realistic approach to say, yes, we need prioritization. So we need to move from one area to area. We need to also deliver certain things with a result, because it also delivers the motivation. It also accelerates the motivation of people. The worst thing that I have seen in my life is that when the site jumped into too many topics at the same time, too many difficult topics, they were defeated with complexity, with many other reasons, and instead of finishing them, they jumped to another topic, and the whole energy efficiency program got blurred and did not really bring anything. Factor 4, sustaining. It's also very much operational perspective or maintenance perspective, especially. There could be energy programs or energy improvements on an industrial site where you do specific projects, technical projects, organizational projects. But these projects overall, when you look at the total energy intensity of the site, these projects can be eaten out by defects or deficiencies in maintenance. So increasing leaks, negligence in certain manual regimes or maintenance regimes for some machinery, leading to unnecessary energy losses. This is especially true for aging plants with a lot of maintenance challenges. So we need to respond with change management. We need to respond with corrective actions. Factor 5, meaningful measurement. Of course, you can read a lot of manuals. You can spend a fortune on metering equipment. My best advice is formulated here in 3 points. One is design the energy monitoring fit for purpose and use the best practical units you use in the industry, per unit of product, per volume, per value, depending on your complexity, depending on the nature of your industry. I think metadata must be sufficient, structured, and converted into meaningful information for different stakeholders. Accountability, it's energy teams, it's consumers, it could be financial controllers. It's important to talk with them in the right language and the right focus, the right zoom of the data. Factor 6, continual adaptation. So I also experienced a number of sites which were very mature in energy efficiency, or they were very new with new designs, and they were very proud of their solutions, and they said there is nothing to be done. We are so great by design, it's world class, whatever. Or sites that made a big program, they went into kind of self-complacency. So there was an onset of the culture of saying there are more excuses than opportunities. So you have to also address this in culture by sharing, by motivating, by sending some change agents to rejuvenate this kind of culture. 2 examples at the very end. One is my brewing example. So to drive this energy efficiency agenda for many years throughout multiple sites, over 80 sites, different geographies, I tried to embed 3 elements. One was to say energy management is setting best practice standards, so requirements, minimum requirements, things like recommendations for and this was called the Carlsberg Preparation Manual. We try to embed it into energy performance culture using lean methodologies, so discussing problem solving, looking at measurement data, providing meaningful information at different levels of and different stakeholders. And also at the end to prove to the top management that this link between performance and the standards we pick from energy efficiency agenda, they work. You see on the graph on the right-hand side, which is showing you the correlation between the score that was developed for energy efficiency manual and the specific heat consumption, in that case per site. Of course, some deviations are related to product mix, to different independent variables, but in general, there was a very good message sent. The more mature you are on implementing the best practice on energy efficiency, the better you perform. And that's why we needed the support for projects, for people, and so on. On the project perspective, let me skip through the slides. It is an example of Upper Austrian Energy Agency that is probably also, I think, present in this conference. I like this approach of proactiveness of the energy efficiency. So regulators on a local, regional level to say, for the industry that is acting in our area, it is to provide the sticks, meaning local legislation, stricter standards, time-based bans on certain things like phasing out oil and so on, providing carrots, meaning consultations, working groups, financing, supporting the payback attractiveness of projects. The tab-marines, which is about knowledge sharing, it's about celebrating successes and campaigning, and innovation, of course, not being afraid of saying, yes, we need to foster also innovations. So this is an ideal setup, I would like to say. So internal perspective and also regulators helping us to deliver the energy efficiency projects. And this is an ending note from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Adam. And I really like that you finished with that image, because I think you've thrown into perspective how complicated it is to get everybody on board to deliver the, let's say, the whole picture, the whole function. So we are now at the stage of discussions. And this is where I will take note of the different questions that have been put to us already. And what I'll do before anything else, I will jump in straight away to the questions that have been posted on our Q&A and start with these. I also have some questions of my own, and I think as we discussed, there's undoubtedly going to be more questions appearing. So let me start first. This is a question to Konstantin. And I think it's a very, very important question that is actually relevant across all the different topics we've been talking about. And the question is basically, there are companies who are motivated to change, but how can we motivate unwilling companies to join? And this is in relation to Konstantin and your initiative. And do participants notice positive customer feedback? So Konstantin, I don't know if you'd like to jump in and directly answer that question, please.
Yeah, this is, I have to say, this is a very important question. I think I got you right, that you mean how to motivate unmotivated companies. This is the question.
Exactly. I mean,
yeah.
I think you're, just to clarify, I think what you presented was a number of companies who were engaged, but of course, those who need help want to become engaged. How can we get them on board?
Yeah. I mean, I'm also involved in a national program called Klimaaktiv for energy efficiency companies, and there we have exactly the same problem, and probably the problem is the same for everywhere actually. And I think some of the one answer was already presented in the last slide, but also in other presentations. I would say that one important point is to increase general awareness on the topic, but also to get there to the right people. So I think management commitment is a very important thing, and so you have to reach the manager. But I have to say that this is a theory. In practice, we have to say we did not found I would say not really the one solution where you can motivate the companies. I would say this is quite difficult, and I would be very happy to hear good solutions from all over the world. But in our case, we do workshops, so individual workshops. We started with this the last years. The years before, we made workshops for energy consultants and stakeholders, and now we try to reach like in the IMPAWATT project, but also in the national program, we go to the companies on site. But there is once again the problem that you are only reaching the persons you already have a good a good feeling with it. So it's I would be happy to hear other persons commenting on it. Thank you.
No, I think I kind of use that question as well as an opener, because this for me would highlight a key issue that we actually have. The key issue being, we have all of these wonderful things we want to do, but how do we, one, actually open the door to a company to even be able to talk to them, to make them aware of the situation? So it comes back to, I think, if we want to motivate them, we first still have to open the door. How do we actually reach that door to knock on us? And there's a question here actually, and it's actually addressed to Adam. It's, Adam, you work in a large company and have adopted many energy management processes that helped to achieve things. In your opinion, how can we address SMEs, especially the small ones, considering their organization limits? And I think this actually feeds into the question that was posed to Konstantin and this idea of door knocking. I mean, it's easy for large companies that have a public face to say, we'll do this because ultimately it will help them. But really, how do we get out to all those other companies, especially the SMEs? How do we get to that point where we knock on the door and say, here we are, we want to talk to you? Is that something you can add a few points to, perhaps?
Yes, I will try. So small, medium-sized enterprises, of course, there are multiple problems here. There's a local reach, so they are not facing, they are not normally using the global products. there's typically a very big skill gap or too much attention to many other details. So the technical staff running energy management is limited. So we need to come with the programs supporting. So everything that trickles down from the best practice industry, of course, filtered by the economy of scale, because big industries have different solutions to a certain degree than the small ones. But I think this is where I would welcome things like regulators helping. So running associations, this energy agency schemes, but also maybe through associations. I think small, medium-sized enterprises very often are also associated in a number of organizations that can help. And the third point, I believe it should be through suppliers of solutions. The suppliers, again, maybe through energy efficiency programs driven by regulators. There has to be a solution saying it's not only about selling equipment, it's also after sales, improving, embedding energy efficiency into the servicing contracts of different things. Say it's ventilators, ventilation systems, it's boilers, it's cooling units, and so on. So this is, I think, the way we could reach out to small and medium size enterprises.
Thank you. Actually, what I'd like to do is briefly move away from the list of questions and actually expand on this particular one, because I think this idea of the door knocking aspect, how do we get to that point? Because we have presented some really good ideas today. We have presented, for example, Adam has shown how it works in the large industry. He's addressed, let's say, key issues like what a difference commitment can make, or what issues lack of commitment can create. Rod has talked about the 5 steps. These are the things we should do. We've heard about 2 great initiatives, which are basically supporting companies implement actions. And then we have the knowledge sharing initiative. All of you have great ideas, great experiences. Would the other panelists like to add to this? How do we actually knock on the door of the companies and get out to them? How do we talk to 1 million SMEs? How do we get hundreds of large multinationals on board to use this information, these existing resources? I'll put it out to the panel very quickly. Feel free to put up your physical hand. I can see it myself, and I will let you answer that question as with great knowledge you have. So would another person like to answer that? Cédric, Rod, Helena, Stefan, Konstantin?
I'll start. I was involved with some SMEs in Turkey recently, and the World Bank set up a fund of $100 million for financing energy efficiency. How much of that was taken up? 0. Those SMEs had no idea how to access that money. They didn't know how to develop a business case. And I was trying to get the engineering companies or the ESCOs to say, you knock on the door, you show them some solutions. You know, these little SMEs, they're just trying to survive. And it's going to be even worse now with the COVID-19 problem. And so there's got the role of intermediaries can't be understated, that they've got to play a much bigger role. I used the word entrepreneurship. Last year, Ruth Murik from Duneworks in the Netherlands set up a webinar for the IEA, one of the implementing agreements, on entrepreneurship. How do we build that into? I mentioned earlier in terms of the mandatory energy audits that we were required to do under the Energy Efficiency Directive. Now that's for large industry. Hardly anything was done. Those ESCOs or those engineering companies should be knocking on the doors and saying, look, we can help do that for you. They're not. So in some ways, I'm answering it by not being able to answer it. You've got to appreciate that little SME is busy and trying to just survive. And so somebody's got to help them with a solution, whether it's a utility where Cédric works or an ESCO or something like that. You cannot expect them to do it. And again, in terms of even the business case, they did not know how to go to the bank with an idea, even to change their lights in an SME. So, you know, we're starting at base 1.
Yes, and I'm glad you confirmed the problem, because I think this is ultimately a key problem, that we can come up with all the solutions we want, but if we can't get them to the audience, this is a difficult thing. Then I have a question, and sorry, I want to build on this because it actually leads to a number of other questions that are on the board. If we want to bring in intermediaries, we still have to either take an approach that is business case orientated, i.e. we convince the ESCOs that there is money out there for them with this type of people, or we need to bring in ferocious regulation, which just means that everybody does this because otherwise they're going to be fined or literally put in prison if need be. I mean, what do we need to do? Do we need to say we continue to try to sell the business case to these intermediaries, or do we just say governments, get the courage, put out the right type of regulation that is backed up by the right type of support, but things need to be much tougher going forward to really direct the people in the right direction. I'd like to ask the panel their opinion on this, because I think there's a deciding moment here. Either we continue to just try to sell the concept, or we bring in tougher regulation, and that then will, let's say, help sell the concept. Would anybody else like to add, if they have an opinion on that, on what is the best way forward? Let me put it this way. I will actually ask Adam this question, because Adam, you come from industry. Ultimately, if you are faced with regulation and your CEO literally has no choice but to do it, is it something that is just done and will be taken into account in the balance sheets, or is it better to try and kind of consider just the business case without regulation?
Of course, I mean, regulations, the compliance with regulations is very important, especially if it leads to critical non-compliance. So it's risk avoidance. It's also following the pledges. I don't think we can regulate everything by setting standards, setting rules. Maybe certain things like some features that we have to buy in the boiler systems, for instance, on refrigeration systems. Maybe we should start doing this kind of approaches, and of course setting the standards for the different levels, different sizes of the installations. Not going into technicalities here. Maybe a kind of mixed approach, but I think more consultation. So building on Rod's statement, yes, they need support. They need, I don't know. Of course, it will depend on municipalities or regional authorities where they can afford, they can fund an independent energy consultant that will advise small, medium-sized enterprises. Maybe we should run specific to different geographies some projects that facilitate the know-how transfer and solutions. The last point maybe from the discussion, I think it's also very common for the big industries and for small industries, is once we have the audit, once we have the finding of the audits, there is a gap on energy performance. The critical part is who is going to bring about the solution. So very often, even in big industries, the problem is how to deliver the solution. So services, working with suppliers on the modifications of the plants. This is also a missing link, I think. That's why I worked so much on this energy efficiency manual and try to link it with performance and work with suppliers. I was advising on the different solutions for different geographies, depending on maturity of the service sector, whether ESCOs are available or not. So a mixed approach, I would say, at the end.
Okay, no, I think it's a fair point and a good insight, and it directly then leads to my ability to put two questions into one, directed at Cédric and Helena. The main question to Cédric and Helena here is, how can we address the issue of data confidentiality when sharing knowledge and experiences in improving energy efficiency? Now, I asked that question taking into account what Adam just said. Adam says we need to have better engagement. We need to have better engagement with suppliers, bringing them on board to be able to implement these actions. Let's say service providers, again, this idea of intermediaries. Now, I have asked that question because there was another question asked by Thomas. How can consumers and customers make a difference through stakeholder influence? Cédric and Helena, your platform is about knowledge sharing. Could you take it upon yourselves, and I don't mean deliberately just the two of you, but your platform overall, to say, look, we're talking about knowledge sharing, but we need to address this issue of, enabling service providers to implement the actions. And then could consumers bring in a certain amount of pressure that will help this as well? So how well is your platform set up to this? And importantly, how can you manage this issue of confidentiality? Because obviously it requires quite a lot of detailed information to be able to convince the different actors what they need to do and how they need to bring it. Very long question, apologies.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I can see two aspects on this data confidentiality. The first is linked to what Adam says about the importance of monitoring and verification of to show that what we done is real. It's not only greenwashing. So we need to have a good evaluators, and these evaluators they need to have good data, of course. And to protect the confidentiality of data, it's possible to anonymize them. So it's not really a big issue. We can have bills, for example, with a black thing on the detail of the energy bill, and then the confidentiality is ensured. So it's not a big issue regarding this type of data. Now there are more questions with the idea of how to share best practices, how to share bad practices also when we make a mistake. As I said, we need to have a real confidence in between the group. So the idea of being part of a club or a platform is very important to create some confidence. And when we arrive to create this confidence, it's very, very rich to discover that we have the same problems basically to implement energy efficiency. As it was said, it's not so easy, even if it can save money, even if it creates jobs, as we all know, it's not so easy to implement this solution. So when we create this confidence, as we do during these eceee seminars or eceee summer studies or eceee webinars like now, then the fact to be afraid of sharing something disappears, and the advantage are coming. And this is particularly true for energy companies to deal with this double fact that we are in an open market, so we are in concurrence, we are in the same market, we want to have the same clients, but in the same time to have the same problem. So it's not very easy to find a good level between these two aspects. But what I can live in some experience with other colleagues from other energy utilities is it's more interesting to share best practices than to fight for sell more energy or to sell more electricity to another client. Especially when the young people are in the street, all the professionals of energy, they have children, they want to make the world better. And it's more sexy to fight for making a world better than to have another client and maybe 1.0 cents per kilowatt hour to send. But this question of co-petition between cooperation and competition is really a big issue. Yes, and I really want to hear other commentary on this, because there is not a fixed level on this.
Maybe if I can just add to that a little bit, when I work with sort of interactive knowledge transfer projects, the very first step is always to establish the group and to establish the trust within the group. And then depending on who the people are in that group, they have the possibility to influence the level of information they share within the group. And then, of course, the Chatham House rules, you know, what's been said in this room stays in this room, is not, you know, to be used to discredit someone else or something like that. I think that's really a fundamental thing. So I think that it could be a self-regulating thing between the participants in a project. So depending on what they want and the level of their willingness to share different type of data with each other, yeah, you design kind of the collaboration from that. But my experience is that once you've worked a little bit on establishing that trust, it's normally not a big problem. And I guess many of the companies, well, now we're talking about organizations and companies really across the board, and there's so many different things. Many of them they might not be in competition in regard to energy issues. I mean, they are in competition about selling different types of products or services. So the energy is kind of at the at another level in the company. So they can share knowledge with each other on those kind of issues without fear of, you know, destroying their place in the race or something like that, if that makes sense.
No, very good, Helena. I think ultimately this is definitely a point that the more viewpoints we get on this point, the better, I think, because it's extremely complicated and I think there's a variety of answers to it. It's really joining it all up, making it work a little bit in cohesion, I think is the key thing. Now, what I want to do is, keeping an eye on the clock, I do want to bring in the other questions that are coming up. There is a very practical question for Konstantin that I think is worth mentioning here. Konstantin, the question to you was, also considering that to access any content on the website, a registration is required, and this can be a barrier without some carrots. Now, this is where the user has checked an Italian site, for example. So, Konstantin, this idea of having to register for access to a website or information, do you think this really is a barrier? Do you think there's another way that we can do this?
I don't know another way to do it, but in our case, there is a filter behind it, and for some information you do not have to register, and for the full working of the whole platform, you have to register and include some information on your organization. But behind it's completely anonymously. So it's only visible to the provider of the platform, which is basically in our project only one person, and even we do not have full access to this information. And in the platform, it's like this: a company typing in data can invite, for example, for the Austrian website, me to look at his, for example, the surveys he did, or the measures he types in the platform. So it's like in, but we discussed for sure on this point, but it's in our case it's not that big. At least in Austria, I didn't get any comments on this, that some companies did not want to register. But as I said, that a lot of information is already available without registering.
Okay, thank you very much. I thought it was worth mentioning that point there. Now I want to put a question to you that's actually not coming from the audience, but I admit from myself here, but it draws a little bit on some of the information that was shown in the presentations. And this is related to measuring and reporting. A lot of companies, especially bigger companies, are required to report things like carbon emissions, generally to a variety of different organizations, depending if it's investor-led or a CDP or similar. And then, of course, to be able to provide that information in its varied forms, we also need to be considering how we're measuring on the ground, like basic energy analytics, getting our baseline right, etc. However, very often the focus is on reporting rather than measurement. And as we all know, ISO 50001 and similar have a big, they have a big emphasis that we need to measure what we're using before we can actually address any kind of action. However, with the focus on reporting, there's a kind of a neglect on this side to be able to know how to measure accurately. I want to put this question again to the overall panel, because I think it's something you can all answer. Is there a way that we can start to simplify reporting? With many companies complaining that they are reporting to too many different organizations in different ways. And in turn, is there a better way that we can connect or put more emphasis on better measurement to be able to get better reporting? So we simplify our reporting, and by that put more emphasis on the measurement side of things. One, do you see this as an issue? And two, do you see any kind of way around this or approach we should be taking? And I will let my panel put up their hands that I can see. Otherwise, I will pick one out at random and put the question directly to them. I will put the competition between Adam and Rod. Would one of you like to put up your hand first? I see that Rod has put up his hand.
Rod, do it for me, Rod.
Go, Adam, you go first, so.
Okay, so I have no time to prepare. I think there are two solutions. One is internal, one is external. External one is harmonization of reporting protocols. This should come sooner or later, because I was already facing it. There is a growing methodology of calculating the carbon footprint of the total supply chain, so including upstream operations, including raw materials, and so on. And this is still in infancy stage, so it needs also this big harmonization effort in the years to come. So I would go for the same thing for energy performance, for carbon footprint. Internally, it is a smart solution. So when we know upfront the company is intending to subscribe to a number of schemes, reporting schemes, let's consider it as a one stream of data. So let's try to collect through one questionnaire or one database, one software solution, trying to prepare the data tailored to different reporting schemes, so that we are not repeating it, but just collecting it once. But still, it's not solving the problem on the shop floor, on the ground floor, as you say, because the monitoring system for the energy performance has to be really meant with providing meaningful information on performance. So this is also coming down still to the setup locally, including financial controllers, including processes, including accountability of people that deal with energy. So multiple aspects here.
Okay, I think that's I think we're hearing a lot the word multiple. I think there's no one given way to do anything here, and we really need to think of joined up thinking. So rather than put Rod on the spot with that question, I'm going to use this word multiple to ask the next question, because it comes back to one of the key questions that underline panel one, which is this multi-stakeholder approach. How do we bring all the different right actors together to work on this? Because ultimately, if we think about it, even we break it into three, we have industry, we have policymakers, and we have the whole range of supporting organizations, whether it's the financial institutions, the research, the NGOs, the international organizations. We really have these kind of three groups. And I think if we want to address everything from knocking on the doors, to sharing the information, to bringing about the right kind of regulation with the carrot, the stick, the tambourine, and the innovation, and if we want to talk about things like reporting, we need to be talking about this all together, bringing all the different stakeholders more efficiently and more effectively together. We have literally 2 or 3 minutes left. Would somebody like to speak up at this stage about a better approach we can take in bringing everybody to the table on an equal basis, so that it's not driven by one or the other, but that we really have the 3 different groups coming together, working towards this 2050 target with efficiency? Can I ask the panel if they would like to put up the hand for that last word on that point? I would ask in that case either Rod or Cédric from the knowledge or from the policy perspective. Let me go to Cédric, please then.
Yes, it's a very good point. We have great challenges facing this decarbonization aspect. So we need, you're right, I totally agree, new tools. And such platform, when we can share knowledge, when we can discuss these challenges, when we can create common languages in between the companies, industry, between the administration, the regulatory aspect, and also the end users, it's fundamental. I don't know exactly how to create that, but we really need some, I don't know, efficiency hubs or energy transition hub that can mix this all part of the society. In France, they make a great exercise like that with Convention Citoyenne pour le Climat. They pick up randomly people from all the society. They put them together with scientists. They met, I think, 8 times. And they produce recommendation for the government, the French government, which President Macron has promised to taking into account into a big referendum. So I'm sure this type of participative approach with all stakeholders will be very productive and very important. I totally agree with you, Hannes.
Hannes, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Stefan, to give our final last word on that point.
Please, 30-second last word, Stefan.
Thank you. Well, in order to bring those different stakeholder groups together, we have noticed that there is a main obstacle of speaking different languages, being able to put the individual roles in the position of the one talking with, and therefore you talk apart from each other. So that's the main issue, which also relates or inspired me a little bit to those 5 steps. But also there are different approaches to tackle that. And one of them is the UN eceee Task Force on Industrial Energy Efficiency, where we aim to bring the existing things from the different dimensions together and make use of that more effectively to trigger action on site. Yeah, so that is basically for those that knock on doors to know which argument will appeal to the person answering the door, the person within companies to know how to get through to their bosses, and also to get the requirements, the regulation that leads to, okay, we do that. We have the, for example, audit report, but we need to have that in a way that it leads to action. It's like in school, if you have to do something by force, you don't do it passionately. So how do we get it done passionately by everybody?
And on that word of bringing passion into energy efficiency and decarbonization, I think we'll leave it because it's, I think it makes it more attractive for everybody. I would like to thank all our panelists for some really excellent presentations and a very good discussion. I think, yes, of course, we've highlighted many of the issues repeatedly, but I think it's great to see that we are on the way. There are ideas, there are interesting approaches that we can undertake. So many thanks to all the panelists. I would like you to imagine a huge active applause in the background from all the audience who unfortunately must remain silent, but you're getting it. You're getting the virtual applause. Fear not. Then I would like to just say one tiny word on the next panel 1 session, which will be at 2 o'clock in 1/2 hour. It's connecting with industry to be able to support them more effectively. So many of the questions we have left, I won't say unanswered, but still open, will be continue to be addressed in the next session. So please do join us. You're going to learn a lot more about some great solutions and some great ideas of how we knock on doors and connect with industry. Many thanks to all and enjoy your 1/2 hour lunch break. All the very best.